joins me now. Welcome to Uncensored.
Hi, Piers. Thanks for having me today.
Do you know what, Marjorie? You're one of the most fascinating people in American politics and have become that in the last couple of years, because the movement you've made is now being followed by a lot of other people. And, you know, I posted on X yesterday that Donald Trump, who I've known 20 years and consider a friend, but at the moment, he just seems to be on a mission to piss off absolutely everybody. And a lot of those people are people who've been big supporters of his. You, Tucker, he laid into Megyn Kelly, to Candace Owens, to Alex Jones. He's laid into the Pope. He's mocked Jesus Christ, which has offended a lot of the MAGA Christians and so on. Giorgia Meloni in Italy, he's laid into her now. He's laid into the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, pretty much every other European leader and so on. I don't know what is going on here, but I think my first question for you is, what do you think is going on here? Why is he so willing at the moment to want to torch so many people that were loyal to him?
Something very interesting is happening right now. And let me be clear. I've never been a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm not buying the sudden attempts to rebrand her as some kind of political hero. But the fact that the very person she helped put in power has now turned against her says a lot. Because at the end of the day, this story isn't really about Greene. It's about Donald Trump, the way he treats allies when they stop falling in line, and the consequences of the political culture that helped get him where he is today. Before we get into the full story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Make sure you like and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's watch the clip.
You know, I think that's the question that everyone should be asking, and I don't have the answer to that. This has been shocking to watch the president change over the past year. While he's president of the United States, you know, we fought very hard to get him elected. I myself spent millions of dollars, traveled the country, campaigned for him, spoke on his rally stages all over the country. And he called me a traitor because I fought to release the Epstein files. But just as you said, we've watched him turn on literally everyone that were once either his friends, his allies, or his supporters. And it's so concerning to me. And I honestly can't answer why this has happened.
You know what's really interesting? If you take your positions, for example, which seem to have enraged him, you wanted full disclosure of the Epstein files. Well, that was exactly what he said he wanted when he was campaigning in 2024 to be president again. You know, you didn't want America to go into expensive, pointless Middle Eastern wars. Well, again, that's what he campaigned to stop America doing if he became president again. You know, I look at this and think, why is he so opposed to you when you're basically taking the positions that he was taking himself just 6 months ago? Or longer than that now, over a year ago, but you know what I mean?
Right. I have no idea. It is honestly something that I legitimately can't answer, and it's confusing, and many people don't understand it. The way I feel about it now, though, is President Trump will soon be the past, and we have to look towards the future. And I think many of the issues that we thought were real problems back in 2024, some of them are still there, but they've also drastically changed. We have real problems in America now that Donald Trump has been president. We're finding ourselves in an escalating war in Iran, which is something that none of us want. It's one of the most unpopular things being polled in America today. But we have real economic problems, rising inflation, rising costs of gas, rising cost of living, younger generations that are unable to thrive and don't have hope for the future, but even bigger problems, nearly $40 trillion in debt, and Social Security will be bankrupt in 7 years. So I think, you know, this is the man that I supported to make America great again. However, I think America is going to find itself in a much deeper hole going towards the next elections.
Would you agree with the following statement? If we confirm that you have won, if we confirm that you are the greatest and most victorious blocker in the entire world, will you put down the phone for half an hour, just half an hour, and attend to your main duties. To the 30 million Americans who have no health insurance, to the 800,000 Americans who are homeless, to America's infrastructure that's dilapidated, to the $38 trillion of United States national debt. Would you concur with that message to Donald Trump?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, those were the things that I had been saying to the president, to the speaker, to many of my colleagues before I resigned. Health insurance, for one, is a serious problem. And when the tax credits expired in January, there were over 200,000 people in my former district that were unable to afford health insurance. So yes, that's a statement that spans many issues. But yes, I would agree with that.
But here's the extraordinary thing, because that statement was made by the Iranian embassy of Armenia.
It doesn't surprise me. I think the entire world can see clearly what's happening in America and what President Trump is doing.
But what the MAGA crowd will say, and I can hear them say it already when they watch this exchange, right? They'll say, Marjorie Taylor Greene siding with the Iranians against Donald Trump. What do you say to them when they say that? These were people that used to love you.
I say I'm always siding with America, and I'll never apologize for that, no matter whose statement I agree with. Siding with the American people over cost of living, cost of health insurance, their jobs, the economy, and their future is always the right thing to do. And so I wouldn't be fazed by that.
The White House provided this statement to The Hill yesterday in response to your critique of Trump's DoorDash photo op. They said, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a quitter who pathetically trying to stay relevant by going on liberal media shows to bash President Trump. Unfortunately, Trump derangement syndrome has rotted former Congresswoman Greene's peanut-sized brain. Your response to that charming description?
Wow. I hadn't heard that until you just read it now. Actually, I had resigned after the president called me a traitor, vowed to literally destroy me, and was going to primary me the same way that he is doing to Thomas Massey right now, which I thought was so incredibly unfair to my district, who had elected me and President Trump. I'll tell you this, Piers, it's actually a really good thing that I'm no longer a part of the institution that has a 13% approval rating in the United States among the American people. Also the same institution that can't even fund our own homeland security right now. So I'm actually very happy to no longer be in Congress and not have to receive nasty phone calls from the president that I supported to get elected, and also be called to the Oval Office to be scolded for not voting for certain things that he wanted that were against our campaign promises. So that would be my response to whatever little staffer at the White House wrote that.
And from a pure factual point of view, have you ever had your brain measured? Is it larger than a peanut?
I haven't had it measured, but I'm quite sure it's larger than a peanut.
The stuff that really, I mean, look, I'm a Catholic, and I found it pretty, I didn't like his attack on the Pope, particularly it's the first American Pope. I think Pope Leo settled in very well. I like the way he speaks. No Pope's ever going to support war. It's ridiculous to think they would. He launched a full throttle attack on him at the same time that he was reposting memes of himself as Jesus Christ, and then kind of preposterously tried to pretend he was a doctor, and that's what he thought he was doing. You were very critical of this. You described it as blasphemy, and said if it's more than blasphemy, it's an antichrist spirit. I mean, you're effectively calling Trump the antichrist there. Explain what you mean.
Yes, this came after how he called to, he said he was going to completely wipe out an entire civilization of the Iranian people, which was completely evil. And these statements came after what he said on Easter, which was atrocious. And then he put out the photo of himself basically being Jesus on Orthodox Easter, which was so blasphemous. I think it shocked everyone. And then he comes out and says, oh, no, that was me being a doctor, which was absolutely ridiculous. Everyone knows that's not him being a doctor. That was him literally trying to replace God, which is Antichrist. And that is an Antichrist spirit. and it's written about throughout the Bible and talked about among church leaders everywhere. It's talked about in the Catholic Church as well. And so yes, I called it exactly how I saw it, and I believe many Christians all over, and like you said, we all found it to be so offensive and blasphemous. But then he lied, and he didn't even apologize. He said, "Oh, I thought I was being a doctor." It's like, no, you're lying. But then he put up another picture, I guess today, of him being hugged by Jesus.
Yeah, we've got
So
that here. We'll just show viewers. Yeah. What do you make of that?
I think I find it insulting that after he committed complete blasphemy and then lied about it, and now he's trying to play to Christians, like saying, "Oh, Jesus loves me so much." He's trying to say there that he's being used by Jesus, being used by God, playing the so-called Trump card. Well, we can look to the Bible and see in many places where God did use all types of leaders to accomplish all types of things, and they weren't always good things. And so the president constantly puts up memes and posts and tries to play to his base, but I think many people are so turned off right now that they're just not even going to fall for this one.
When was the last time you spoke to Donald Trump?
The last time I spoke to him was on the telephone. I was in my office in the Rayburn building. He was at the White House, and he was yelling at me because I wouldn't take my name off of the discharge petition. And I told the president, there's no way I'll take my name off of here. These are women that were raped at 14 and 16 years old, and we have to release Epstein files. It's the right thing to do. It's what we promised. And he was so angry at me, and he told me that his friends would get hurt. He said people that I supposedly know. He said at Mar-a-Lago, and I'm not a member of Mar-a-Lago. I've only been there a handful of times for certain events or campaign functions. So I don't know these people, but he said that his friends would get hurt, and he was very, very angry at me. It was a very bad conversation.
What do you make of that, though?
He's covering it up. He fought us the entire time. He did everything in his power to stop the Epstein files to be released. He even forced Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, to do everything he could do to stop it from being released. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. We were even shut down for 8 weeks. We had a government shutdown back in the fall of 2025 for 8 weeks. And I believe that was part of trying to prevent the Epstein files from coming out. And it's covering up for rapists and people that have committed all types of crimes. It's completely wrong.
What did you think about Melania Trump coming out with her sudden statement last week about Epstein and demanding that people go and give evidence under oath?
Yeah, that was so shocking. The press was completely shocked. They were prepared for her to come out and maybe speak about a bill she's supporting or foster care, an initiative she's supporting as First Lady. I actually was glad she came out and talked about it because it brought it back up in the news cycle, and I think it needs to be there. I don't know. I know there's many different things people are saying about why she did it, that perhaps she was getting ahead of a news story or getting ahead of some sort of information that may come out. But I was still glad that she spoke, and I was glad that she talked about the survivors. However, she called for them to go on record in front of Congress, and she called for Congress to act. And I actually disagreed with her there. The right thing to do is the Department of Justice needs to prosecute people. And that's what the survivors have been asking for. They've told their story over and over and over again. What they really want is justice.
When King Charles visits the United States in a couple of weeks, there's been a rumor, which has been played down by the palace, actually, that it's unlikely to happen, that perhaps the Queen, Camilla, who's taken a big interest in victims of sexual abuse and so on, might meet privately with some Epstein survivors. That looks like it won't be happening. But King Charles will address a joint meeting of Congress, and obviously his own brother, Andrew, has been disgraced and shamed because of his involvement with Epstein, but hasn't actually put himself up for any scrutiny by either by Congress or by law enforcement here in the UK. Do you think that it would be a good thing for either the king or queen or both to meet with Epstein survivors when they're over in America?
Yes, absolutely. I really hope that they do. That was also what I had been asking of President Trump. I'd asked him to bring them into the Oval Office. He brings in all types of people in the Oval Office from all walks of life, whether they're sports teams that just won a national championship, whether they're no matter who they are, he brings in all these people. And I had wanted him to bring in the Epstein survivors. As a matter of fact, quite a few of them told me they even voted for him. And I tried to explain that to him over and over again, but he's refused to bring them in the Oval Office. But I definitely do hope the king and the queen will meet with them and hear their stories.
You said the last time you spoke to him was over this. Have you tried to talk to him again, or has he tried to contact you?
The only time I reached out to him was via text message after I had resigned and he had been attacking me, and I was receiving in just, I can't even count how many death threats. And but the death threats escalated on one of my children, and I had sent those death threats to the FBI director, Kash Patel. I sent them to the vice president, J.D. Vance, Susie Wiles, James Blair, and I even texted the president. And I was so upset over death threats on my children because of him. And the quotes and the death threat were from what the president had been calling me a traitor. And I'm not a traitor to my country. Standing up for rape victims doesn't make me a traitor. And I reached out to the president and to let him know this is what's happening because what you're saying about me. And he was very unkind about these death threats. And so that was our last exchange.
What did he say to you?
He basically blamed me. He had no compassion for death threats on my children. He blamed me basically that if my son were to get killed, it would be my fault.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And I said back to him, I said, no one's children should ever be the victim of death threats or have any kind of political violence brought on them because of our politics, because of our disagreements. He had no compassion whatsoever.
What do you feel about that? I mean, you knew Donald Trump very well. You were very close to him. You were very friendly, supportive, and so on. To reach that point in your relationship, how do you feel about that?
I thought that tells me exactly who, it's like a nail in the coffin. It tells me exactly who Donald Trump is. Some of my biggest political enemies would never say that to me. Democrats that I may have had disagreements with in Congress would have never said that to me. No one's ever said those type of words to me. I don't know what kind of person basically has no compassion or care to someone's child being threatened to be killed. It's unimaginable, really.
There are people who think that he's having cognitive, mental issues, his erratic behavior, extreme comments and so on are escalating. Poly market, the prediction market says 10% chance Trump's removed via the 25th Amendment before 2027. I mean, I would think that's highly unlikely. But what do you think of this debate? From knowing him as well as you did and observing him recently, have you seen a change, or can you explain why he's now lashing out with quite such frequency?
I do think there's something wrong with him. Well, everyone knows that the president doesn't sleep very much. He just doesn't. He doesn't get a lot of sleep. That can affect anyone's cognitive ability. It affects your moods. It affects your outlook. It affects everything about you, your physical health and your mental health. After he called to wipe out an entire civilization of Iran, and no matter what anyone thinks about Iran, how can anyone wish for their entire country, every man, woman, and child, to be killed? That to me is so evil, and it shows real mental depravity that needs to be examined. And after that, I called for the 25th Amendment. Do I think it'll happen No, I think it's extremely unlikely. One of the problems within the Trump administration, one of the problems in the Republican Party right now is people serve Donald Trump as if he is some sort of cult leader. And it's I don't know how anyone can't go against the president when he says such things as wiping out an entire civilization. Especially anyone in the administration or any Republican serving in the House or the Senate that calls himself a Christian. They have to call that out. And there's an unwillingness there of every single one in the administration and every single one in Congress to be willing to challenge the president when he says such things, as well as saying we need to examine what his mental state is. He's approaching 80 years old. And, we have to be really honest with ourselves. We were challenging Joe Biden's cognitive abilities and what is his health. And if we were willing to say that about Joe Biden and relate it to his age, then everyone should be honest and say the same thing about Donald Trump. It's completely absurd to not apply the same standard there. And so, this is another one of those issues where, look, I'm a Republican. I'm still registered as a Republican. I very much stand on issues on the right as like pro-life and border security. I'm against the trans agenda on children. None of these things have changed about me, but at least I'm willing to call it out and say we may have a problem with our president because look at the shocking things that he's saying. Look at the things that he's wanting to do. And what direction are we moving in, and how much can this damage our country?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, thank you very much indeed for joining me on Uncensored.
Thank you, Piers. It was good to talk to you today.
So, after watching that entire interview, a few things stand out. First, I'm not exactly rushing to defend either of these people. What struck me most was how both seemed unwilling to address the obvious question. Why did Trump suddenly turn so aggressively on one of his most loyal supporters? They danced around it, but never really confronted it head-on. Greene spent years defending Trump, campaigning for him, and standing by him through controversy after controversy. Yet the moment she started pushing on an issue he clearly didn't want pushed, the relationship completely fell apart. That's not a small detail. That's the entire story. Now, when it comes to the threats against her family, let me be clear. Threats against anyone's children are unacceptable. Full stop. But it's also fair to point out that Greene spent years participating in an extremely confrontational political environment where outrage, personal attacks, and public pile-ons became the norm. That doesn't justify threats. Not even close, but it does make the situation politically ironic. And then there's Piers Morgan. What I found interesting was his apparent surprise at some of the behavior being described. At this point, nobody should be shocked by how Trump responds to critics or former allies. That's been a recurring pattern for years. What's more interesting is how differently some media figures approach Trump compared to other controversial figures. When interviewing certain guests, they're incredibly aggressive. When it comes to Trump, the tone often becomes noticeably softer. Whether that's friendship, access, influence, or something else, I'll leave that up to you. But overall, this interview revealed something bigger than a personal feud. It exposed growing cracks inside a political movement that once demanded complete unity. And when former allies start publicly airing grievances, that's usually a sign that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content.